Hi, everybody. Wanted to come back and talk about chapter 2 for this Sunday with our adult Sunday school class, Here Are Your Gods by Chris Wright. Last time you may recall, we looked at the basic question about what are the gods in the Old Testament, and especially as they relate to Yahweh, but then also as they relate to the worshiper. And just quickly here, just going to make this video brief. One of the thing that we saw was that compared to Yahweh, they are nothing. But when it comes to the worshiper, there is something there that we need to consider, and something there the Bible seems to hold forth for us to consider. And so when we come to that question, then, well, what is that something of idolatry? We can break it down when looking at Scripture into three different categories of what that something could be. These aren't multiple choice. These are, and yet there's three sort of ways in which the Bible tends to identify the gods of idolatry. First off, they are objects within the visible creation. Secondly, they can be demons. Or third, they can be the products of human hands. So let's look at each of these three offerings here. First, they can be objects within the visible creation. And I won't go through each of these verses, but I'll let you look them up on your own time. We'll hopefully have some time to discuss the content of what's being presented in these passages. But in Deuteronomy 4, Job 31, and Ezekiel 24, we see that the Bible does speak about the other gods that are being worshipped. Sometimes are visible aspects of the visible creation, like the sun or the moon. Excuse me, Ezekiel 24 is focused somewhat on animals because it's in relation to its critique of Egyptian idolatry. So, and the fact is that when humans worship the creature rather than the creator, the whole world order is turned upside down. We were made for worship. The heavens and all of creation was made to reveal God's glory and power, His majesty, many of His attributes, and when we make that crucial shift from worshiping God and God alone to worshiping the creature, then everything's turned upside down. So, what about our next category? Well, the Bible does speak of worshiping demons in the context of idolatry. Now, interestingly enough, there are only two Old Testament references to worshiping demons, Deuteronomy 32 and Psalm 106. There are more in the New Testament, and so I think as Christians, because we're more familiar with the New Testament, sometimes I think our default answer to what is the something that's being worshiped in idolatry goes right to demons. But interestingly enough, when you compare it with our next category, the next category far outweighs demons in terms of references in the Bible. So while it's certainly true that worshipers that are worshiping idols are engaged in the worship of demons, the Bible also mentions that there's perhaps something even more prominent in how we understand what that something is that's being worshipped. So finally, we come to then the other thing that's being worshipped is the work of human hands. And this is by far the most common Old Testament description. And so to lay out a few verses here, 2 Kings 19, Psalm 115, Hosea 8, also Hosea 13:2, Habakkuk 2, Jeremiah 10, and there's these great passages in Isaiah 40 and 44 that speak about what is being worshipped is merely the work of human hands. And that stands as a stark contrast in relation to the worship of Yahweh. So not only are people worshiping something that God has created, like the sun or the moon or the stars, they're actually worshiping the very things that they have created. And so that is kind of a monstrous idea. Now, some have objected to that way of framing it that we see in the scriptures and claiming that, well, Israel, when they ridicule the idol worshippers as merely worshiping something they've made, that they're confusing the idea of the physical idol or the physical statue with what that object represents. And so they may say, well, of course, any pagan knows that he makes a statue and that that statue is the work of human hands. But what Israel seems to be failing to grasp is that there is something beyond that. There's some symbolic relationship between the statue and the supposedly invisible deity that's being worshipped. Wright says that this objection is often raised in the modern world and modern scholarship. There's also the sense of modern pluralism, which wants to see all religions as basically the same, and so doesn't want to privilege the Bible's religion over others, and so it wants to sort of knock it down a peg that way. And there's also sometimes a chronological snobbery that we think we know a whole lot more now, and so looking back, we look at what is being said as very simplistic and not very profound. So, but whoops, let me go back here. But Wright answers this objection by appealing to several passages in Scripture where that understanding of the statue and the object that the statue represents is clearly understood. So you have Judges 6, 1 Kings 18, Isaiah 46. And so he notes that Israel was fully aware that the idols supposedly signified invisible deities, that Israel made no distinction between the invisible deity and the statue because technically there was no distinction. The gods in heaven were just as man-made as the all too obvious statues. What Wright concludes with is the fact that for much of Israel's scripture, when they critiqued the idolatry of other nations, they were recognizing both the idols or the statues, as well as what those idols and statues were supposed to represent. Both of them were seen as human constructs. Now, that's important because it opens a door for church engagement in the modern world, because it opens a stronger connection between what we often see in today's world than what we did in the ancient world. So most references to God made of human hands, interestingly enough, comes when referring to national or state gods. National gods are the ultimate depiction of human pride. And so you have something like 2 Kings 19, Habakkuk 2, Hosea 14, Ezekiel 28, and Acts 19, all of them sort of illustrating the expression of human pride, especially in the context of national or state religions, being the expression of what their gods really are. It's a projection of human pride, human greed, and human aggression. And I'll close it off here with this quote from page 22, where Wright says, "Pride, greed, and aggression in the forms of nationalism, consumerism, and militarism still elevate themselves into idolatrous status in our modern Western cultures." And by that, he's wanting to sort of open the door for us to start thinking that the way Israel critiqued the gods and understood the gods in the ancient world actually can help us very much as we engage with modern forms of idolatry. Well, I see my slideshow has come to an end, so I'll stop here, and I look forward to sharing this all with you on Sunday.